Hi, Bob.
Hi, Dean.
How are you?
How are you?
I'm good. It's so nice to finally meet you after all our emails. I hope I wasn't pestering you
Hey,
too
we're
much.
almost on the minute. It's lucky. I usually have more trouble getting on. I've got equipment that was like made in the last century, so
No, you're
bear
doing
with me.
great. Well,
Bear
this is
with
this
me.
is a podcast that sort of celebrates the art of roasting with a special emphasis on writing for roast, which is why we're so excited to have you on because it's a rare opportunity to speak to somebody that wrote on so many Dean Martin roasts. But I wanted
Yeah,
to
well,
ask you, but before that, I wanted to ask you, you had a kind of an unusual path to
boy,
a career as a Hollywood comedy writer. You were a lawyer working up in Northern
yeah,
California. So how did you make
yeah.
the leap from there?
Oh God, don't start me. I I was sitting in my office one day, and we had a disc jockey. Actually, it was a disc jockey named Don Sherwood, who worked on KSFO, a big station up there at the Fairmont Hotel, and he'd have guests on who were like Barbara Streisand was at the Fairmont, and the big Nat King Cole and all those big stars had come and were booked there. And so he had a lot of guests like that, and he was well known and very, very clever and very funny. And so I thought, oh, I'll write a few jokes for him because I've been listening to him since I was a kid. Just as a hobby, I started sending him material, and he started doing all this material. And after about 3 or 4 months of doing everything that I sent him, he would perform. And it got to the point where I was doing little scripts for him and his sidekick, the news guy. And I just gradually picked up the skill that I'd never done before of doing little radio scripts. And people are listening to me in the morning. He's giving me all kinds of credit. He would just rave about this guy that sends his stuff in. He's just a genius in comedy. And I'm thinking, he's talking about me? I just never had, thought of that. I mean, I had been doing things kind of on the periphery of that. In the Navy, I did some cartooning, and in college, I did some cartoon work, but mostly just nibbling on the edges of comedy type stuff, but never thinking people make their living doing this. And he called me in one day and he said, "You really ought to consider uh, how good you are." And I said, so he says, "I'm going to send your material over to my agent." And therein was the first step of just an incredible bunch of things that happened to me because the agent saw the stuff and he said, "You've got a lot of talent, and I don't have any clients right now, but I would recommend that you get down here and you know think about doing this because you're good enough to do this for money. People pay for this kind of stuff."
And by get down here, he means Los Angeles, Hollywood,
Yeah,
right? And before
LA, that's
long,
where television was centered, and so Don knew that too, and he said, "Well, you're in a great position because you're not risking that much job wise because you can always fall back. You're a lawyer, for God, you can work anywhere." But anyway, so then we were living in Los Gatos, so I was practicing in Palo Alto, commuting, and I and that, I had read just by chance an article in Writer's Digest magazine, and it was by a guy named Gene Parrott. And I thought, what a great article this is because he was giving tips on how to get into the business. And I said, this is like somebody, training their assassin. Must be very competitive. And here's this guy telling us how to do it. And so when I saw the name, I thought, I'll write to the magazine and see if I can get in touch with him and tell him how much I enjoyed this article. So before I can do that, I'm watching the Carol Burnett show and I see his name on the credits. He's a writer for Carol Burnett. And I thought, wow, I'll just write to the CBS. And so I did. And I'll send him the material that I've been doing and show him because he said in the article, if you want to break into comedy, write for anybody you can. Go around and help, clubs that need uh, going away parties and retirement stuff and that kind of stuff. Just get the experience of writing for other people. and putting funny lines on paper and then having somebody perform them. And it's a jump, and you have to get comfortable with that.
Right.
But if you can do that, uh, it's it just changes your life because it's one of those little skills that most people can't do, and most people need. Most people just hate public speaking. So if you can help them with speeches and stuff. So here I've got all this stuff that I've done for Don Sherwood already, and I'll just send it to Gene and show. Well, as soon as he saw that, he said, oh, I'm writing material for Bob Hope for his monologues on the side. I work at Carol Burnett show, but I said, are things that bad in Hollywood that people are doubling up? And he said, you have no idea how hard it is to find good writers down here. And I said, I wondered why you wrote that article. And he said, oh, I'm always looking for writers of quality because those are the people you want to work with. And there's enough work for everybody here. This whole business is like 20 comedy writers. And when I got to town, it was not that many people. You'd see the same names on the variety shows. It'd be the same group of guys and the sitcoms and everything. And and they all helped one another because
Right.
they wanted to get ahead in the business that was still youngish, not like radio, but it, uh, it it was something that you needed the experience and stuff. So when I went on Dean Martin, I was recommended by Gene Parrott, who had heard because the way it worked then, if there was a need on some show, the word would go out.
Right.
We're looking for some writers, and would go out to the whole group of people who are doing this, and it just came across,
Wait.
Parrott's desk over at Carol Burnett. So he called me and he said, "You'd be perfect for this." And here, call this number. Harry Crane, it was the name, head writer.
Right. On the
I
Dean
made a
Martin
phone
Celebrity
call to Harry
Roasts. Right.
Crane. I said, Gene Parrott on the Carol Burnett show recommended me. Oh, yeah, yeah. He was a big character. I got so many Harry Crane stories. But he said, what have you done? I said, well, he was a street guy, he's like a New Yorker. He'd worked on, in fact, he came up with the concept of the Honeymooners. He was working on
Oh,
the
wow.
Jackie Gleason show. And had a great background. He'd been a screenwriter for a while, and the nicest guy. If he liked you, if he didn't like you, he'd throw you out the
Right.
door.
It could be gruff. Yeah.
So it's one of those things. And luckily, he liked me from the start, and he helped me. But he said, what have you done so far? I said, well, Gene Parrott recommended me to the Dinah Shore daytime talk show, so I've been doing that. He said, they do a lot of comedy over there. I said, not a lot, but I've done a few things.
Some cooking
And
segments, right?
I said, yeah, I said, but I've been doing Bob Hope jokes because what Gene was doing, he would take my material. He'd send me the assignments he got from Hope for monologues, and then I'd have all the topics. So I would write lines, and then I'd send them to Gene. I called them to him on the phone. He'd take them down and put them in his routine.
Ah.
So it beefed up his routine. And he was paying me a few bucks. I forget how much it was, just so it wasn't
You're
taking
kind of a
advantage.
subcontractor almost.
Yeah. So he knew it was great practice for me, is what he was doing.
Right.
And he was like a mentor teacher guy. And so I was doing everything he said, whenever he said. And it got to the point, I said, what do I do next? He said, I don't know. Nobody I've ever helped has ever gotten this far.
Well,
So
that's
I thought,
encouraging.
wow, So I was
So,
just pressuring him, I got to
so
keep my
with
career going.
within a couple of months, it sounds like, of moving from Northern California, here you are, and you're hired on the Dean Martin Celebrity
It was
Roasts, and
almost a couple of months, not quite, not
yeah,
quite. We moved down in 1976, and then I got the Dean Martin show in 77. So between 76 and 77, I worked on two other shows before I got to Dean Martin, and they were fabulous. experience for me. But just what I needed. The Dinah Shore show was great because I could see how TV worked. I'd never been on a set before.
Right.
And so I didn't even have a house here, a place to live. So my wife Shelley got in the car and went back to sell our house in Los Gatos, starter house, you know, in a tract. And I booked into a motel on Beverly Boulevard, walking distance from CBS Television City. And I'd walk to work in the mornings. And the way Dinah worked, and it pretty much was the way Dean worked too, all these syndicated shows are done in big lumps, you know.
Right.
They're not done anywhere on a daily basis. So the way it looks, so that nobody can talk about what day it is, or no dates are ever mentioned because your show might not air for a month or two.
Right.
And but we would shovel through all these stars all day long at CBS. Sometimes we would run out of stars, and she'd say, "Run out in the hall and see who's standing around out there." Maybe George Burns. George, want to do the Dinah Shore show? Oh, yeah, well, I've got a little time. And he'd go in, you know. So it was like that, and it was just great for me to observe all this stuff, and I could see just from watching what everybody did. What's the director do, and the floor manager, and
Right.
all of that, producers, and all these people, and you can imagine they're pretty damn good at it because uh, they were able to churn these shows out and make it look like, you know, it was a daily nice breezy little thing. With Dinah Shore was a great gal, by the way. I've been so lucky to work with nice stars. Who gets to, you know, break in with Dinah Shore? Then I did a syndicated thing that lasted 13 weeks. It aired for 13 weeks. We did the shows, I think, in one weekend, called Steve Allen's Laugh Pack. And I worked with
Ah,
Steve Allen and I worked with all those guys, Don Knotts and, you know,
Louis Nye and all those
Louis
guys.
Nye, all of them. And
Wow.
and I would later work with them on Bob Hope
Right.
and and some of them on Dean Martin. So it was kind of a little clubby type thing. And once you got into it, however you did it, um, you were part of the thing. And here I was, you know, by that time I'm pushing 40 years old. I'm no kid.
You got a bit of a late start, right? Yeah.
Uh, Very late. You know, I practiced law for 10 years. So
Right.
I thought, wow, I really took a detour.
I want to
But
get to some specific questions about the Dean Martin roast. I want to hear
yeah,
how the writers' room worked on that, and if you know roast humor came natural to you, and you know, did you all sit in one room together and get assigned different celebrities on the dais to write their material for, or did you all sort of group everything together? How did that work on the Dean Martin roasts?
oh, it was very different from sitcom writing. Most sitcoms were a room like that, and most big variety shows were a room like that, like your show of shows, you know, Sid Caesar, and with all those guys in one room and pitching and all that. Never had that. With the Dean Martin show, Harry Crane hired uh, pairs of writers. You had a writer and a partner. So he hired me and he says, "You need a partner because I hire two people at a time." And so he said, "Have you worked with anybody?" I said, "Well, on the Dinah show, I did a few comedy spots with a guy named Mel Chase." "Okay, see if he wants to come over to the show and you know, partner him with you." And so he did that. And I've always had partners on the Dean Martin roast I did. A guy named Mel Chase just died last year. But
On the Dean
both,
Martin roast per se, like how would they say to you, okay, you two are going to take Orson Welles and write his
yeah,
speech?
it was
And
exactly like that. In fact, when you first started, you were lowest on the totem pole, so they would have 3x5 cards on a board, and they would have all of the upcoming guests, and you would be able to choose based on your seniority with the show from these cards. And so at first, you ended up with really the hard ones, which is good because it forced you to learn how to make like Dr. Joyce Brothers relatively amusing.
Right.
You know, you can't make her funny as such, but amusing at least. And so you would have to start with guests like that, and then as you gained experience, you would get bigger and bigger stars. And that was the second great thing about the Dean Martin show was that we had to write them fairly fast, so you'd have a couple of days for each guest, and then you would get another assignment, and the next one would be Orson Welles. Now you have to go. Gee, what would Orson Welles say? So what you're doing, you're putting words into established characters that the audience knows how they speak and think and act and react to things, and you have to be able to help them be themselves, really,
Right.
and but do it in a more amusing way than they have the time to do thinking just on their own. So that's the whole trick of it, and that's pretty much it.
I wanted to ask you
Kind
something
of
that I think people might have a hard time believing, which I found fascinating. The whole time you worked on the Dean Martin roasts, is it possible that you never met Dean Martin? I...
yeah, I never met him on the D. Martin Road. I met him on the Bob Hope show years later.
That's so funny.
And the reason was that Dean took the Dean Martin roast only because it wouldn't require much work. What happened was uh, he got tired of doing the variety show where he had
Right.
to actually host a show, and they wanted to keep doing it because the ratings were solid, but he was getting tired of it. So Greg Garrison, in his wise, he was really a sharp guy, and
He was the producer of the variety show and the
yeah,
roasts.
and the
Yeah.
director too. And he guided Dean in the early days, and he really knew how to handle Dean and what Dean would go for. So he says, "I've come up with this idea that you can play golf all the time, and then we'll comp the a big hotel in Las Vegas, and we'll get all the stars stay there for nothing because it draws the people, and you know how stars were in those days in Vegas. It was just great, and so we'd be there taping all these shows and all these big stars. You get on a elevator, and there'd be Jimmy Stewart standing there. You know, right, Jim?
Wow.
Yes, yeah. Well, and so it was just a kick to see how the show was done, and it was Garrison's idea, and he thought he would be able to get a big hotel, which he did, the MGM Grand, to comp all this stuff. It wasn't costing NBC anything really to use the big hall that they had there, and it's just build a set, and we'll get these people pretty much at scale, all of them, who you know were either a little on the downward trajectory or on the upward, but very little. Well, you'd roast big stars, but you booked a lot of comics and stuff.
Right.
So everybody was happy. It was just
What was amazing is if when you watch those Dean Martin, I mean, the rumor is always that Dean Martin would be on the golf course to the last minute and then just come in, but he was
yeah.
so loose and so capable.
Well,
He really hit his lines, and he really, is the
he
master
was
of that.
one bright guy. He had no formal schooling to speak of. I never did find out. I don't think he told anybody. But somebody asked him once, "Have you ever read a book?" And he said, "Yeah, I read a book once, Pally. What was the name of it? Black Beauty." I read that once, But he was a character and the nicest guy, but a very quick study and very smart.
Yeah.
And Garrison knew this. So Dean didn't have the patience to rehearse sketches with guests. On the
Right.
variety show, he would do these sketches, and so Garrison would play him at the dress rehearsal. They would tape it. Then Dean would come in at the last minute before he hosted the show, look at himself being played by Garrison, memorize the lines that he had to say, and do the sketch right
Yeah.
then with one just in his mind. He could just see it once and do it. Now this is,
That
you know,
worked so well on the roasts. I feel
talented
like
guy to
on the
be able to do
roasts,
that.
on the
Yeah.
roasts, I feel like that worked well because it was that loose, freewheeling spirit of the whole thing, and
Well, he knew
whatever
how
lack of
to
preparation he had from all his years in the nightclubs, he knew how to do it. You know.
took advantage of all of that. I drink a lot thing. He didn't drink a lot. Dean wanted to be home by 10 o'clock to be with his family. He was a
Right.
family guy,
Yeah.
just the opposite of what you would think, you know? But literally, Dean would not come anywhere near the offices that we had across from NBC when we were writing the show. God, I think doubt he even knew where we did it. But Garrison was on top of it, and so Harry would put everything together. Now Dean had a monologue at the beginning of the roast and at the beginning of the variety show too,
Yeah.
and so he would have to memorize that just with one read through, and Harry would take him the script, and Dean would go through, hey, it's nice to be here, blah, blah, blah. Have any questions or anything? He'd ask, what's this joke mean? You know, Harry would explain it to him. And so that's the way it worked.
That's
And then
amazing.
on the roasts, by the time he was doing that, he would just fly in on the day of the taping. And we had done all the rehearsing and all of that. I mean, the show was rehearsed so that but not together. Nobody saw the other people, so it was all, spontaneous.
Yeah.
But we had to run through with all of the guests what it was going to be like, because a lot of them would get stage fright. And I remember I'd always be assigned Zsa Zsa Gabor. And I said, why do I get Zsa Zsa all the time, Harry? Well, you're the only one who can talk her into not walking away. She would get cold feet right before going on. All of a sudden,
That's
nothing would
funny.
look funny to her. That happens a lot when you're thinking, boy, that red light comes on. Now I've got to actually do this stuff. And and then all of a sudden, it doesn't look funny to you. And so I'd have to sell her on each joke again and go through, on the cue cards. Barney McNulty was doing that show. He later did Bob Hope too. And I remembered taking her by the hand, and I'd say, Barney, hold that one and read it. And she'd say, why do you do diamond jokes about me? And I said, well, that's what you're known for. As soon as they hear the word diamond, they laugh. They react to just the word when you say it. And so it makes our job a lot easier. Oh, it does? I said, yeah. But believe me, we appreciate a strong character like you have. Oh, okay. That's okay then? Yeah. Next one, Barney. And I'd do that all the
Oh
way through
gosh.
till I
Yeah.
got to the end. It'd be okay. And then she'd go out and she'd be fine.
Yeah.
But Dean would come in, Harry would go through the monologue with him, and the theme song would come up. Dean would come out. Da, 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 da. Well, we're back here at the Rose. Tonight we have a wonderful star, Jimmy Stewart, and he'd forget who the star was. You have to remind him, who are we honoring? Well, just look to your left, Dean, and be a big portrait of the guy. Oh yeah, you got that thing. Yeah. Then at the end, literally, they had the stage set up so that there was a stage door at the very end, and he could have his limo there. And as the theme was playing, good night, everybody. See you next time. We were doing like one show every couple of months. And he'd march down, get into the car, and he'd be in the air by the time the music finished.
Oh my God.
Just that quick. He couldn't wait to get the hell out of Vegas, because by that time, it was anathema to him. He didn't like the life up there. He never was really a show type, that kind of guy. He
Right.
wanted to be with his family and go home, eat some good Italian food, and play golf. And that was his life.
There,
Perry
there's a
Como, another Italian singer. Very much the same. Very simple guys, really.
There's a famous story about Dean Martin where he was having a party at his house and he got tired of the party and he went up to his bedroom and called the police on his own party. So
Yeah,
the police showed up and he wanted the place cleared out and he didn't know how to do it, so he called the
right,
cops.
right. No, don't doubt it. Yeah.
um,
No, so
the,
yeah,
the,
I didn't meet him on that whole. I had no chance to meet him because none of the writers did, and only Harry had any contact with him, and of course Greg Garrison, and that was it. So that's the way it went until we had him as a guest years later on the Hope special. And I said to him, Dean, I gotta thank you. And he said, Hey, Pally, what are you thanking me for? I said, well, I want to thank you for my house. I got a nice house in Studio City. I got a couple of dogs, a couple of nice cars, a three-car garage. What are you talking about? I said, Dean, I worked for you on the Dean Martin roast. Oh, Pally, I was in all of a sudden remembering, oh, that was great times we had, yeah. So
That's amazing.
reminiscing,
And
but
of the 10 or 12 roasts that you worked on some huge ones. I mean, you honored Frank
yeah,
Sinatra, you honored Jimmy
yeah,
Stewart, George Burns, Red Fox. And you had people like Ronald Reagan on the dais,
Ronald
Orson
Reagan,
Welles,
yeah,
Lucille
yeah.
Ball. Anybody in particular stand out from those big nights of all those star-studded nights?
Well, mostly what you remember is things that happen off the stage and away from the show because they were staying in the hotel there with you, and you'd run into them, and it was just unreal. But no, the stories all run together because there were so many
So
times
many
that
times, yeah.
yeah,
One of the fun
uh,
things about the roast was the non-stars that you had on. For instance, I mean, they were rising stars. You would have Ruth Buzzy on playing a character, playing her
yeah,
spinster character, Foster Brooks doing his drunk routine, or Dom
yeah.
DeLuise would play a crazy chef. Or did you guys write those bits as well, like the character bits, the
Well,
sketch bits
yeah,
that were
a
on?
lot of times we would pretty much let them do stuff that they wanted to do and had, but they'd run it past us and they'd say, "I want to do this joke. I want to do a little bit where I say this. Can I do that?" And then we would write that up in our way that we did it,
Yeah.
and just kind of accommodate them. And then we did that on the Hope specials too. That everybody you want everybody to be happy. You never want to have anybody not comfortable with what they're saying and stuff. That's what we were paid to do, and that's why we're there all the time. So if anybody wants to change a line, even at the last minute, I decided I don't want to do this one. You would come up with an alternative for them, so that they would be happy all the time because, they're they are people, and it's nerve-wracking
Of
to
course,
be
yeah.
watched by all those people in the audience. And we, of course, don't have to worry about that.
Yeah,
I
I
always
can
tell
imagine
people,
giving a speech when you look over and Orson Welles is staring back at you.
yeah,
That's got to be
you
intimidating.
can think, yeah. And now, one of the most interesting stories from the roast that I tell in my cruise ship lecture. Uh, we were doing a show in Vegas. I forget who was. We were honoring Red Fox, I think, and Don Rickles was booked. And at the last minute, he calls Garrison. He says, "I just got a booking that I've been trying for years to get, and I've got to fly to Paris or something." And he just couldn't do the show. So Garrison, in his wisdom, this was brilliant. We do the show, but without Don Rickles. And then when we got back to Burbank, he took photographs of the entire dais as it looked up there, and then had big cardboard cutouts of everybody who was sitting there. So when Rickles came in at NBC to this replica dais, he'd look down and he could see where everybody was seated. And Dean was supposed to be right next to him, and he kid him and stuff. Rickles came in. There were about three of us who watched this and some other technical people, and that was it. That was the only audience he had.
So, in other words, Rickles did the roast to nobody, and you guys inserted it
Did
into
it
the
to
roast.
nobody, and the only mistake Garrison made, he just assumed that all tuxedos look alike, and they don't. So Don Rickles, in this particular show, and I pointed out to people, I have a clip of it. I said, watch him. He comes out and he's got a velvet collar in that one shot, and then on the other shot he doesn't have a
Oh, that's
velvet
so
collar.
funny.
And yeah, and so, but how talented Rickles was to be able to just recreate the feeling of Las Vegas over at that dead NBC studio theater thing,
Right.
with lights and stuff. But the dais looked exactly the same, and so the only thing that you don't see is Rickles and Dean Martin in the same shot together. You just see Rickles, and then Dean Martin reacts to what Rickles said,
Ah,
and it's
interesting.
back and forth like that, and just brilliant editing that Garrison did, and he was brilliant at editing the show anyway. But the only thing he couldn't control was the length of cigars on the different stars of
Oh,
the show.
right. The
They
continuity,
had a
right?
lot of cigars on that show,
Yeah.
and also the levels of the drinks would keep switching, going up and down, up and down. But other than that, he could edit the thing together so that it looked exactly like that's the way it actually happened. And a lot of things were out of order and not
Things were
done
was
in
that
order. It was
was
done
that
in a
just done that one time with Rickles, or were things fudged a lot for that
That
kind of
was the
thing?
only time that was done, and it was only done for Rickles because Garrison wanted him so badly.
Yeah.
His rating rates were always good. Any Dean Martin roast with Don Rickles always was higher rated than any other show, and Dean Garrison was very aware of that. So that's pretty much why he did that for Don, and he loved Don, and so did I. I think Don was such an anomaly because he was nothing in real life like you would think. He was the softest, he's a big pussycat kind of a guy. And you'd think, how can he get out there and insult strangers? Is that your wife? Or you've married a goat, for God's sake. And you're thinking, gee, this guy's a truck driver or something. He's not going to take this well. And he would get away with it because he had something in his attitude which said, I don't really mean this.
Right.
And, and people had to sense that or he would die very
Right.
quickly.
Right.
And he knew that. He knew that he was pushing the envelope, but he was such a good actor. A lot of people don't realize he started out as an actor and
Went
wanted
to
to
the
be an
Academy
actor.
of Dramatic Arts, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's what he was doing. He was acting the part of a smart mouth comedian making fun of people, but he knew how to do it in such a way that they wouldn't kill him.
Right.
for it. And
Let's.
anybody who could talk to Sinatra like that has a lot of guts.
Oh, he used to say horrible things to Sinatra.
Yeah, but it
Don't
was
just sit there.
great.
Don't just sit there, Frank. Enjoy yourself. Hit somebody. All
Yeah,
that kind
that's right. Yeah.
of.
Oh, God. Yeah. Wow.
Speaking of Rickles, he falls into that category of the sort of powerhouse comedians you would have on, like Burl and Red Buttons and Jack Carter. Did you guys
Yeah.
help them with their material, or were they such powerhouse comedians they had their own kind of?
Well, we would run the stuff by them. If we had some suggestions for them, we'd go to them and say, "Here, uh, would they'd have an angle maybe. They'd say, I want to do a thing where I talk about working with them at such and such.
Yeah.
It'd be some sort of little hook, and then we might come up with some lines and stick them in their routine. But those were pretty much their own routines, and by the time they got to that level, they it could do anything they wanted, and but always open for help because uh, you got these, paid writers there anyway, and whether you use their stuff or not doesn't matter. You should be able to at least have a choice of
Right.
seeing it. And so that's the way that worked. And every once in a while, you would get a nice joke in somebody's routine, and you'd think, boy, I'd love to write for this guy permanently, because he did that line great. But that was the key to what I did.
Yeah.
was writing for people to make it sound as though the lines originated in their own brains. And with Bob Hope, it got to the point where it was so strange that he would say to me, more than once he said this, he would say, "Did I say that blah, 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 or did you write that?" And I'm thinking, Jesus, I'm so far into his head that he literally cannot remember which one of us was stoking the fire at the time, like you're inside of his brain. And it's a weird thing because it's unnatural, isn't it?
Well, in comedy writing, that's the sign of, I feel like, genius is when you can capture somebody's voice so well because their attitude and their comedic
their
voice.
attitude to the point where they can't tell that you're faking it.
I have one last question I might want to ask you, because the episode of our podcast that this interview is going to go in is kind of Oscar themed. We're gonna roast Will Smith because he's of the slap when he slapped Chris Rock at the Oscars.
Yeah, that's good.
And I know Bob Hope. Of course, he hosted the Oscars more than anybody. He holds the record.
More than anybody, right?
19 times.
I got to write one of them. I got to write on the staff of one Academy Awards, and I had an aunt who, no matter what else I did, when I got that gig, that was it for her. You wrote the Academy Awards? Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, God. It was like the end of the world. Oh, I'm related to a writer on the Academy Awards.
Wow.
But it was the 50th anniversary. I forget what year it was, in the 80s. And he hosted it. And we wrote the monologue.
Oh,
so
incredible.
Whenever they toast the writers of the Oscars, which they do once in a while, I'll be on that list because of that show that I did.
Oh, incredible. Do you think that in Hope's day, and I know when Johnny Carson hosted too, I mean, insult humor was kind of a part of those monologues too. They would tease the stars in the audience and things like that.
And it's really sad today that things have become so politically correct and silly. Jesus, we're comedians. That's what you do. You have to insult somebody,
right?
Or you don't have a joke. That's what jokes are. If
Yeah.
you're not insulting somebody or something, it's not a joke. It's a statement of some kind.
Right.
Anyway, I want to thank you for having me on your podcast here.
Yeah, Bob, I can't thank you enough. It's such a treat to talk to somebody that was such part of two big legacies that were a big part of my love of show business, the Dean Martin Roast and the Bob Hope specials. So,
okie doke, Dean. Thank you, and thanks for the listeners for sticking with us.
All right, take care. All right, bye-bye.
Bye.